New York. The Nets just cannot find some health. For whatever reason, they keep getting struck by the injury bug. James Harden out indefinitely after suffering a rehab setback on the court during on-court activities a couple days ago. So now James Harden is out indefinitely. Obviously, we just saw Kevin Durant leave the game against Miami with a high thigh contusion. This is a problem. This is a problem. And Steve Nash has come out and publicly said that they are going back to square one. And this is a problem because we always knew with the Brooklyn Nets, was chemistry going to be an issue? Now, I would be the first to admit that I always dismissed the idea that their chemistry wouldn't be the biggest impediment to this team. The biggest impediment would be just rather maybe their talent doesn't stack up. But seeing the slew of injuries, the spate of consecutive injuries being sustained to this team, it calls that into question again. Can this team truly find that cohesion that they need going into the postseason? Now, I believe that they can. I've always posited that I think this team, regardless of the circumstances, this talent, they have such an abundance of talent that it just exceeds any potential flaws. However, I will acknowledge this, that this is an issue, and sometimes the past has a weird way of rearing its ugly head forward to the present. Because let's look at who this team reminds me of. It reminds me exactly and eerily familiar to the Los Angeles Clippers last year. Let's think about it. What was the narrative surrounding the Clippers last year? Oh, this team is unbeatable when they're healthy. 11-1 last year were the LA Clippers before the bubble, when Paul George, when Kawhi, when Patrick Beverly, Morris, Lou Williams, when all of those guys played together. When they were healthy, that was the mantra. No, this team can beat anyone. They're unbeatable, unbreakable. Anytime they were in some stressful situation, a close ball game, a tight ball game, we'll figure it out in the postseason. This is the same issue that I think is starting to plague the Brooklyn Nets right now. You look at the Brooklyn Nets, they're 6-1 this year in just 7 games when it's Kyrie, KD, and Harden. When all 3 of those guys are on the floor, they're 6-1. The only game that they lost was a trivial game to the Cavaliers early in the season. And apparently, according to ESPN stats, there's never been a champion in which the top 3 scorers on the team, the top 3 players in points per game, if they've each missed double-digit games this year. Kyrie, KD, and Harden have all each missed 10 games this year. So this feels a lot like a team that we've seen before in the Clippers. And again, why did the Clippers crumble last year? It wasn't simply just the fact that their best players, Paul George and Kawhi, crumbled in the postseason, and especially in Game 7 against the Denver Nuggets. That obviously was the main catalyst behind their fall. But it was their lack of leadership. Who was the leader of the Clippers? Kawhi Leonard is not vocal. He's more of a passive leader. He's great when you insert him into a well-oiled machine, but if he has to start the ignition, if he has to be the guy that galvanizes everyone, at least as of last year, he wasn't able to do that. Paul George didn't have the cachet and the respect in the locker room to be able to rally those types of guys. Was it Doc Rivers? Well, Doc Rivers has his history and a litany of examples in which he has come up short in the postseason when he's had a lead and when he's been a favored team. Who was their main leader? That was the biggest impediment to their success last year. Now it appears that Rondo is going to be able to fill that void, that he's the one that will be able to galvanize this team. In fact, the Clippers have only lost one game since Rondo has joined their squad, and that was when they played the Philadelphia 76ers on the road, and they lost by 3 without Kawhi. And now let's shift to the Brooklyn Nets. Who is their leader? Where's the leadership going to come from? KD is obviously their best player, but he's more of a taciturn and a passive leader himself. James Harden, as great as he's been in the regular season, we've seen the shortcomings with the Houston Rockets in the postseason and how he's still an all-star, but he's not an MVP caliber player in the postseason. Not to mention he joined the team late. So are you saying that James Harden joining the Brooklyn Nets midway through the season and they're going to just bequeath and confer that title of most valuable player onto him? And then you look at Kyrie Irving. He is no doubt clutch in the postseason. He is one of the clutchest postseason performers that we've seen. He hit one of the best shots, one of the clutchest shots in NBA history to win Game 7 of the NBA Finals back in the 2015-2016 season for the Cleveland Cavaliers. We've seen how great he is. But with his mercurial personality, is he really the wild card? Is he the guy that's going to lead this team? He wasn't able to do it in Boston. Not all his fault, but that's the reality. Is it Steve Nash? Steve Nash is a first-year head coach. Kyrie and KD have already come out and said that they don't even need a coach. So the biggest flaw right now is who is the leader of the Brooklyn Nets. So I hear all this talk about, well, cohesion and chemistry is going to be their biggest impediment and is going to hamper their chances of winning. And while I don't deny that, I was always willing to look past that. The reason why this team may or may not succeed and reach the NBA Finals, which I still think they will, is because at this moment in time, they haven't played long enough together to determine who the leader is. And that's a big difference. When KD was with the Warriors, yes, he was the best player, but it was clearly Steph's team. That was established right from the beginning. So the reason I worry about the Brooklyn Nets, again, is not necessarily because of the chemistry. I think we've seen, even in a small sample size, that this team can mesh really well. We've seen that. But the question is, who is the unanimous leader of the squad? And we don't know. We don't know who the leader is. So, again, I even had the Brooklyn Nets reaching the NBA Finals before they made the trade for James Harden, before LaMarcus Aldridge signed and then retired, before Blake Griffin joined the team after being bought out by the Pistons. I had the Brooklyn Nets going to the NBA Finals with just KD and Kyrie. And that prognostication seemed to be corroborated when James Harden joined the team because they looked unbeatable. But again, with this spate of injuries, what I'm more worried about is who will rise through the ashes and say, you guys are going to follow me. And that lack of a true number one leader is what ultimately might derail this team. And again, with another injury like this sustained to James Harden, that's what I am most concerned about.